Good morning. Welcome to our UpSkill Works Forum, where we engage business and community leaders, policymakers, and today leading thinkers on the key workforce issues our region and nation confront. I'm Peter Beard, and I lead the Greater Houston Partnership's UpSkill Houston initiative that partners with employers, educational leadership, and community-based organizations to strengthen the talent pipeline of our region's employers, and to help Houstonians to connect to good jobs that increase opportunity and prosperity. Before we get to our guests, I want to do several things. First, as we enter the flu season, I'd like to offer a couple of quick reminders. Second, I'll review a couple housekeeping details and acknowledge the underwriters of the UpSkill Works Forum series. As I indicated, we're entering the flu season, and we can do a lot to ensure we are safe for the holiday season as well. There are 6 things we already know that can help Houston and all of our residents stay safe and healthy. First, get your flu shot. I got mine on Monday. Wear masks, social distance, avoid congregate settings, gather outdoors, and wash your hands. And now for the housekeeping details. All attendees are muted and your video is turned off for the entirety of the webinar. The chat function should be used only for technical issues. Please use the Q&A to submit questions that will be moderated. And if you have any questions for Jane, please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, because this will be moderated and we'll address those questions. I'd also like to acknowledge the sponsors of our UpSkill Works Forum series. The Greater Houston Partnership and UpSkill Houston would like to thank our gold level sponsors, Houston Community College, the Merrick family of companies, Texas Mutual Insurance, Winstead PC. Our silver level sponsors include Accenture, AT&T, Centerpoint Energy, HCA Houston Healthcare, Lone Star College, San Jacinto College, and Western Governors Universities here in Texas. Thank you to our sponsors for your support of UpSkill Houston's work. I'd like to introduce Peppa Gates, who serves as the Vice President of Regional Operations for Texas Mutual Insurance. Peppa will be introducing today's session and our guest. Welcome, Peppa, and thank you to Texas Mutual for its leadership in this region and the state of Texas. We also appreciate your sponsorship of this important series.
Thank you, Peter, and good morning. Texas Mutual is proud to be a partner with UpSkill Houston and supporting these virtual sessions on important workforce topics in the Houston region. Today, we will discuss some very interesting survey findings of the American people and their feeling and attitudes about work and the future of work. The COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated and accentuated a change already underway in education, the disruption of career pathways into good careers, particularly for middle skill workers. Today, we'll explore insights from this survey by WorkingNation and consider how we can use those insights to help people find new pathways to opportunity in Houston's economy. We're especially fortunate to have with us Jane Oates, President of WorkingNation. Jane has a very distinguished background, and we're fortunate to have her with us today. She leads WorkingNation, whose mission is to bring to light the hard truths about the looming unemployment crisis and bring the country together to create and amplify solutions for a changing economy. Prior to joining WorkingNation, Jane served as Assistant Secretary for the Employment and Training Administration under Labor Secretary Hilda Solis. She has also served in the New Jersey state government as Executive Director of the New Jersey Commission on Higher Education and a senior advisor to Governor John Corsi. Finally, she started her career as a public school teacher in Boston and Philadelphia. On Labor Day, WorkingNation and Frank Luntz released its first American Workers Survey, which is the topic of today's forum. Welcome, Jane. This is sure to be a great and insightful conversation. And now I'm turning it back to Peter.
Thanks, Peppa. We appreciate the support of Texas Mutual and its leaders like you that are improving workforce here in Houston, but also in the state of Texas. I also appreciate the leadership you provide on the UpSkill Houston Executive Committee. So thank you. And Jane, thanks for taking time today. And let's really jump into our conversation. I know we're going to be reviewing the survey results and a number of slides today. So just as a reminder to our audience that we will respond to questions viewers submit via the Q&A function. And I'm going to be monitoring that chat and sharing timely questions with Jane as we go along. So as you have questions for Jane, please feel free to submit them. Okay, Jane, let's start with an easy question. Tell us about the mission and work of WorkingNation. And we touched on it with your background, but I know you have all been doing some really great work.
Well, thanks, Peter. And let me just, before I even answer your question, let me just say how much I respect and just am thrilled to be working with you anytime I can, and how I love your team. And Peppa is great. I mean, I'd love to meet the rest of your sponsors if she's an example. And just a word to everybody, please put some comments and questions in there, because this whole idea of doing these Zoom things, what I miss most is touching and grabbing and hearing from people. We all learn so much from one another. So your questions will make it at least simulate it that we're together. So now to your question, WorkingNation is a nonprofit media enterprise. We are totally built around the concept of helping people see the connection between what they're learning and what they could be doing in work while they're working or as they're looking for a job. So that connection between education and work, as you know, brings together everything that I've been doing for the last 25 years. But WorkingNation does it in a way that honestly I never thought of, and I wish I had. When people see people who look like them on a video, being successful, getting the job they aspired to, finishing the training course and getting that industry recognized credential, then they believe they can do it. And one of our biggest challenges, I think today, and certainly moving forward, is motivating people to believe they can be anything they want to be with some hard work.
You know, and Jane, I'm really excited about that because we're doing the same thing. When we did focus groups of, students and parents, they wanted to hear from workers in the role, why they got there, why they liked the job, what advice they would give. And we know it makes a big difference. So that, we have a lot of alignment. And so why don't we go ahead and kind of turn to kind of the results that you all found. And so, I know this is going to be a long deck, but at the same point, I just saw there was so much rich information there, and I'd like you to break it up in segments so we can take some breaks. So can you share some of the top level findings? Because it looked like there was a lot of optimism. And what did you find in your survey as you probed into that?
So as you mentioned, Storyline really did the survey. Our team worked with the Storyline, Frank Luntz's team, to really construct this survey, put the questions together. 800 people were surveyed. And like all survey companies, they have a network of tens of thousands of people, and they just randomly select. So it's much, if you're thinking of what is it like, it's almost like the Nielsen ratings, So when we look at some of these results, it's important to remember that it's a snapshot, a moment in time with these particular people. And as I said to you when we talked about this first, this isn't gospel, right? But it really does give you some interesting insights to build on the anecdotes that you already have at the local level. So yes, the first number one takeaway I would take, Peter, is that people are amazingly optimistic. While this slide tells you, how we all know the stress they're under, how anxious they are. But look at this. Do you believe that you can aspire still to have a good life, the American dream, a middle-class lifestyle? In the middle of COVID, 75% of the people that were surveyed believe that was true. So, and the 15% that were neutral, I still take that as a positive. I worry about the 10% who don't believe it, but so optimistic, and that should guide us, I think, as we move forward.
And when you say neutral, that's probably because situational in the pandemic. It's like,
right.
Where are we going? So there's a lot of uncertainty.
And some of those people, you can't go back and ask the individuals an extra question. Maybe they were sick at the time. Maybe they're, someone in their home was really sick and they weren't even thinking about jobs or salaries or the American dream. 100% of their attention was focused on the immediate need to either get well themselves or get their family member well.
And I know you can go into some details, so there's some additional slides, I think.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a recurring theme you're going to see over and over, Peter, that this sense of financial security. I was surprised, quite frankly, that only 40%, 47% really were saying that sense of financial security was the American dream. But it was overwhelmingly the largest response. And if you look at the other things that are down on this list, what interested me most was the things that we often think of when we try to be trivial about people. Oh, they want a car, or they want to go on a vacation. Those scored very low here. And even things that we think about, you know, with the American dream, graduating from college, single digit response, 8% response. But really, home ownership, having a good life, and that big takeaway, going to bed each night feeling financially secure. We know what this means. All of us have either been there, you know, when we were starting out, or at some state, you know, in our professional lives, especially anybody who went to graduate school, you know. But this is what we hear from people all the time. They don't want to worry about just having enough to make ends meet. They want to have enough money that they don't even have to think about it anymore. So I think that's really important. And I think that financial security is going to lead into other things. Look at the age here. I mean, I think across the board, no surprise, the older you are, the more concerned you are about that financial security. The younger you are, the more concerned you are about living the good life. You know, I don't think there's anything there. What I do think is important when you look at this is being employed in a well-paying job is still the #1 issue for people who are making over $100,000. So, you know, as we were growing up, $100,000 was rich. People know now that that's barely enough to live in many metro markets. So I think it's really interesting. You'll see as we progress, you'll see a lot of this skewing on age and skewing on education level. But I think it's really important to remember that the differences are really not that great. You know, I mean, when you see some of these things, the span between the highest and the lowest really not that large. So I think this was a big takeaway for me, that, and I hope we dig down a little bit deeper in this idea, what are you doing now? Would you call it a job or a career? You see pretty evenly split between career and job, but what do you aspire to? And you see a clear delineation here that 72% of the people surveyed wanted to have a career. So that should make all of us that have been in this line of work for a long time feel a little bit better. We've been talking career pathways for decades, and it's resonated, right? People understand that they might have to take an entry-level job, but they really want to build a career. And I think you'll see with this, there's some sense that people want to build a career within a sector or with an employer as well. But I think that language, and you know, pollsters are always about verbiage and semantics. The language of talking career is very positive when you're talking, if you're in a one-stop, an American Job Center, if you're at a community college, really important to talk about that concept of a career instead of just a job.
And that showed up in even our focus groups, that we heard a lot from students and parents that career trajectory had kind of a longer term sustainability as opposed to kind of it's just a job.
Yeah, I think you see here very clearly, again, skewing by age. 18 to 29-year-olds, they have taken a job. They haven't really, you know, started their career path maybe yet. So if I were working with that age group, I would really try to parlay that thinking about this job and where it goes with a career. And of course, you know, you see the same thing, although I was really interested in how many people that were making up to $99,000 still considered what they were doing a job. You know, sometimes we put dollar amounts on those definitions, and clearly the survey said dollar amounts didn't make a difference because people really saw what they were doing, even making $50,000 to $99,000 as a job and not yet that career path. And of course, no surprise, people making over $100,000 feel like they've hit a career track. I think it's also, if we can just go back to that other slide, Lauren, just for a second, I think it's really interesting to look at the ethnic and racial breakdown there, that 72% of Hispanics, people who are Latinx, consider what they're doing now a job. And I think it's going to be very interesting when we look at education. I want you to remember that number, because you'll see something in education that I think is very interesting there when it comes to the Latinx population.
Yeah, no, and as you know, here in Houston, we're on the cusp of, a demographic shift that's going to, will be in front of the rest of the country.
Yeah. So we can move on now, Lauren. Thank you for going back. I hate to do that. Look at this. I thought this was really interesting. What kind of job do you want? So now we're talking about that career aspiration thing. Interesting to me, not a big variance, and you see not a big winner, nobody over 50%, but enjoyable was a big part of it. And rewarding and enjoyable, again, I want to look as we break this out. We all think that young people want to do things that have meaning and purpose, but it came across all age groups that was very important. And look at that third one. So you see 2 and 4 are really very similar to me. I don't know, when people hear them, I don't know how much difference they hear between rewarding and meaningful, and satisfying and fulfilling. All those kind of are close to being synonymous to me. But look at security. I mean, it was very interesting that even in this time, people aren't looking for a more secure job. They were willing to take a job that may be risky. So what would that mean in my vernacular? Maybe they were willing to go with a startup. Maybe they weren't necessarily only going to go with a long time trusted employer in a region, but they were willing to take an enjoyable, rewarding, interesting job with an employer who might appear less secure. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, and we found in our conversations that young people want to make a difference. So that kind of rewarding, meaningful piece showed up in that, and that's how we obviously think about how to talk about it.
Yeah, and I think your work has been amazing. By the way, I didn't comment before because the conversation flow wasn't going there, but the videos that you've made are just terrific. And I think they're the same kind of thing that show, those videos not only show people that look like me in a job that I might aspire to, but they show them enjoying the job. And that's really nice. So as we move on, again, you're going to see financial security and purpose and happiness staying at the top of the list. It's interesting that things like freedom, we hear a lot about people want flexibility. They want to have the ability to work different hours. That didn't come out in the survey. And maybe it was the way they asked the questions. Maybe we didn't frame it right, but it was very interesting to me that financial security, purpose, and happiness still stay at the top of the list.
Well, and we have one of the questions from the audience, which is, how do we give folks personal financial knowledge they need to understand and ultimately achieve financial security? Because it's not just the job, it's all the other behaviors, whether it's credit score, and Georgetown just released this report today that you sent to me, which is, the debt burden that students are facing today. And so how do you think about kind of personal financial education?
Yeah, I'm sorry we didn't get that report earlier, because that would have been good, but you should definitely put that in the chat room so people can look at it. It was amazing to me to see, when you factor in debt, that there are literally more people who didn't go to college earning the same amount of money as people who incurred all that debt. I think I'm looking forward. You and I will both talk about that in the future. But, so I think that debt burden is really interesting. But I do think, when you go back to financial security, who taught you to write a check? So the question in 2020 would be, who taught you to pay your bills online? And, when I think about it, I never learned to write a check in school. Although when I was teaching, because I was a special ed teacher, I was very deliberate in making sure that my students knew how to do those day-to-day things. I'm not sure that people have time right now to teach those things, and things like, this is going to sound old-fashioned, and I apologize to the audience, but if we could teach people to use a bank rather than using a check cashing entity. I don't want to put anybody out of business, but they would save money and they would have security. If we could teach people what it was to have a credit score and why it was important, you know, not opening every new credit card that you can get and maxing it out, but really limiting how much credit you afford yourself and then how much of that credit you use. I don't know how I learned that the hard way, right? Nobody taught me. I learned about credit score the hard way, because if you have a bad credit score, you're paying more interest on your credit card than somebody who has a good credit score. And no, I don't know who tells people that. I really, I don't know if they're in Houston. They may be. John Hope Bryant is a guy who runs Hope, and they're based in Atlanta. But they have they have, you know, facilities all over, however they do them with they're a nonprofit, and they actually spend time doing classes with this on people. And I'm not sure that that's not the best way. I don't know if you're in a one-stop trying to get somebody a job, it's the best place for them to hear how to be more fiscally responsible and to know more. They want you to get them a job. But there are lots of other nonprofits, I'm sure, on the line today. And there's so many great ones in Houston that people, you know, the Urban League does a great job with this. Like I said, John Hope Bryant, UNIDOS does a lot of stuff with this, for the organization formerly known, and I'll always think of them as National Council of La Raza. But, you know, maybe the One Stop has to partner with those entities to really give people somebody else to talk about. I'm not sure I would be open to telling somebody who was helping me get a job what bad financial situation I was in, you know, that I didn't have any money, because they may not help place me. But I think that those lessons, we've lost a lot with that. Schools don't teach it. If your mom and dad don't have a checking account themselves, they can't teach you. So I think it's really important, Peter, for somebody to very deliberately take that on.
Yeah, and to your point, our United Way of Greater Houston has something called the Thrive Network, which are really focused on financial stability. And they've partnered with the Workforce Board to ensure that that kind of additional set of supportive services that generally, workforce boards can't provide because of how the federal funding flows, those agencies provide that kind of support. And I know we got to keep going because I know this is we have much more to cover.
So this just gives you the demographic, of who's looking for purpose, who's looking for happiness by age, by education, by race. I think the really interesting thing here is, and I say this being Anglo myself, but having the wealth of having many Latino friends, that happiness is really ingrained in their culture, much more than it is in the white culture, quite frankly. I mean, people, they are family oriented and community oriented, and happiness is a big part of it. We just need to get the financial security piece of that up for them as well as for everyone. I mean, my goodness, I mean, the most important benefit isn't an issue, but making sure you have access to really good information, and that is. I also think that peace of mind, I was shocked that peace of mind was so important to people with less than a high school diploma. High school diploma or less. I thought that was really an interesting finding.
So I think we're now kind of at a point where we should take a couple questions from the audience.
Yeah.
There's one question really, wanting to understand, when was the survey conducted, the general sense of, the demographics and geographic and other breakdowns of the survey respondents. And there's also some folks that are serving the disability community and are interested, were disabled folks surveyed. And so if you could just provide kind of the general context.
So with great certainty, I can tell you it was conducted during August. The first 3 weeks in August, it was 800 people. And what we know about them is they're from the company Storylines bank of 60,000 people that they routinely use. Those people represent a broad swath, an equal amount of people, by gender, by race. I don't know the answer to disability. I don't know, and I can find out and get back to you, Peter, to see if they were represented. But sadly, as a recovering special ed teacher, I would tell you probably not. You
No,
know,
and when we get toward the end, I want to come back to kind of how are we serving, different populations, including the disabled. So
yeah,
why don't we kind of
absolutely.
continue the conversation?
Yeah. So this one was really interesting, which is a more accurate statement. And 63% of the people surveyed said that Americans lack the understanding and are basically confused about what is the new economy. And not surprising, right? I was kind of surprised that so many people thought Americans weren't afraid. Most of the people I talk to are very uncertain about the future in terms of what jobs will exist and what won't. But this gives you a really interesting lens on the 800 people who responded to this. And I think you should, think about this as we look at the other results.
Yeah.
Okay, so look at, it's really interesting, right? The people that are most confused are the people at the 50 to 69 age level. Really interesting. Are they looking introspectively or are they looking outward? I don't know. That's a question I would have asked. Are you saying you lack it and you're afraid, or others are? Clearly not surprised that young people aren't afraid, right? Because when you talk about the future economy, what's the one word that comes into mind? It's technology. And we would all think anecdotally that young people are less afraid of technological change than older people.
Right, the digital natives.
Yeah, the digital natives as opposed to us digital dinosaurs. Not you,
Yes.
Peter, me.
No.
And now this is one that I want you again to take note of, because you're going to see some contradictions here. And one of the things, just like when I said the Nielsen ratings, you're like, how does 60 Minutes make the top 10 shows and all these reality shows? Are these the same people? You know what I mean? Watching 60 Minutes that are watching The Bachelor, So I want you to take note of this because it makes me excited to learn something new and different. I like the challenge. 61% of the people said that, right? Surveyed. And only 39% said it made them nervous. So just keep this in mind as we move forward, because this is one place where I saw a real kind of schizophrenia in the respondents.
But it also potentially provides an opportunity for, as we confront, the change that's occurring in the economy.
Now look at this. It makes me excited to learn new skills. At 50 to 69-year-olds, 64% more than 18 to 29-year-olds. And it makes them more nervous. So here are these digital natives that we said probably didn't mind, the changes that were coming and were prepared for them. And yet it makes them nervous learning a new skill. You wonder how many of them at 18 to 29 didn't feel like they were successful when they were in traditional education and just got by. But it just shows that we have to give them the same TLC that we would give somebody my age if I walked into your entity, because they're really nervous about it too. And again, not surprising that people that are more educated are more comfortable with education. That shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. But I thought the spread would be greater between people with high school and less, and college grad and plus. The spread is not that large. Again, the spread is larger when we look at socioeconomics, right? Yeah. People who have means don't mind making a mistake. They use the idea, I learned from my mistakes, whereas people who are at the lower end of the earning potential are afraid they're going to lose their job if they make a mistake.
Well, and that's the other thing, as we've been doing some of this other work with the U.S. Chamber, is what it takes to actually kind of engage in skills development and have that financial, a stable financial platform in order to actually, take a course of some sort, or take,
Right.
Take 6 weeks off to do a coding camp, or 12 weeks off to do a coding camp.
That's right. So here are the words we always use, right? And as I said, pollsters are always people who like the verbiage. So lifelong learning at the top is good for us because anybody who's in this field knows that lifelong learning is here to stay. And if you're not committed to being a lifelong learner, you're not going to be a lifelong learner, a lifelong person who's successful. You're not going to be successful as you move on your career. But I think it's really interesting, the words that hit the bottom of the list, like reskilling. We use that word all the time, you know, so should we switch from reskilling to upskilling? Because, you know, we have heard from people that reskilling gives you the feeling that something you already mastered is obsolete or unnecessary, whereas upskilling gives you the feeling that you can build on your accomplishments, you can build on what you always learn. Very simple semantic change, but one that people should consider, and love to hear people's comments on that in the chat box, in the Q&A.
No, but this whole idea of lifelong learning, I think, really needs to be built stronger.
Look at this. I mean, this is really how you would describe a healthy economy. You know, like how do you, if skills training is involved with a healthy economy, this tells you nonstop that people get it. People are really understanding that the thing that the way we've defined the American workforce in the past as being the most skilled in the world has to continue for us to have a healthy economy. And for that to happen, it means you. It doesn't mean those people over there. It means every one of us has to really be invested in improving our skills every day.
So it feels like some of the language we should be using is about a healthy and prosperous economy. And we usually, obviously in the economic development world and
Right.
you know, in government, think about competitiveness and
Right.
other things. And it really should be around more healthy and prosperous.
Yeah, healthy and prosperous seems to resonate with people.
Good.
Now look at this. This, if you only remember one thing from this slide deck, remember this. Look, 31% of the people surveyed said no teacher, no parent, no one talked to them about a career. The reason I think this is the most important thing is this is the one we can change. We can make sure that we saturate people while they're in school, when they leave school, when they come to us, and parents. I mean, you know, I always say parents are critically important regardless of the age because their children always have to listen to them at one point. So if we could get parents of every age to continue to begin and continue to talk to their children about careers and their potential, it could make a difference. My goal in life is to say, if we resurvey on this, to get that never to be zero.
No, and before we take some questions from the audience, this is one of the areas that obviously we're concerned about because we think kind of this career coaching, counseling, advising, guidance space is a hugely important place to bet on, partly because you can leverage people to reach more people to this point. But we also found, you know, in our survey work or focus group work, that there are 3 trusted sources for career information. And, you know, it's parents and teachers. So those are 2, and then faith-based organizations. So, right. You know, we've got to begin to leverage those systems in many respects. And obviously in your role, you know, in the state government in New Jersey, you oversaw higher education, and there's probably more opportunity in this space, you know, in light of Georgetown's report.
Right. Right. No, that's right. I mean, look, one of the things New Jersey did that I can't believe the rest of the country didn't steal immediately is New Jersey took their 15 county colleges, which is what they call them there, community colleges, and they had them form a collaborative for workforce skills only. And it was so interesting because, you know, New Jersey's a relatively small state, nothing like Texas, you know, I mean, but it was a real hassle for people who lived in Bergen County in the north to offer the same programs as people in Salem County in the very south of the state. So what they did is when it came to workforce, they shared curriculum, they shared instructors, they sometimes combined programs. One of the greatest things they did, New Jersey had at that point and still has a lot of biotech companies. And one thing you know when you're in biopharma is you have to have animals, right? You do testing on animals. And if you have animals, you have to have vet techs. And vet technicians make a great salary. It's a wonderful career, lots of flexibility in terms of hours and actual work sites. But it's a very expensive program to run. You know, it's a co-op program. You have to go out and do clinical, just like with nursing. So a lot of the community colleges in New Jersey were dropping their program, and people weren't, the employers weren't able to attract people to move into New Jersey, an expensive state. You know, they were having trouble filling those jobs. What the colleges did is combined it. So literally 4 colleges came together, shared revenue, shared the expense of the program, and that program flourished. But they did the same thing for Starbucks. They literally, as this consortia of community colleges, did all the training for Starbucks in the Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York areas. So their innovation stole business from their neighboring states, community colleges. So I would really say, you know, Los Angeles community colleges, 17 of them, starting to do the same thing. When you have an area like Houston, rich with community colleges, you know, does everybody have to be a master of every trade, or could you share a little bit and let one institution be the lead on one thing and one on another? The other thing I would tell you from my experience in New Jersey is employers were much more likely to get engaged because they went to one point of contact. They didn't have to go to somebody at each of the different colleges. They went to one person, and that person managed their talent needs across the state.
No, and it's interesting because I'm going to try to get Tamar Jacoby to come on in a similar conversation to talk about the work she's been doing at Opportunity America, really looking at kind of the community college as this really critical, you know, place that we need to think very differently along the lines that you're talking about, but also how do you bring them closer to the workforce board because of their, you know, strong skills development programs. We have a question here really around kind of this whole idea that we were talking about kind of digital natives and digital dinosaurs. And just because, you know, the digital natives can download and use, you know, kind of the iPhone, that it doesn't necessarily mean that they have kind of the fundamental understandings of how to, you know, use the technology business process. And I don't know if you have a comment on that, but I know when I have asked Joe Fuller some stuff at Harvard, he's like, if I could wave a magic wand, I would teach, you know, informatics in high school and make sure people had the groundings of what technology really is. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, I think one thing we know is we can't make any broad generalizations. The only thing I would say about the term digital native is they're not afraid of it. They can't use it for job-related things, but they're accustomed to using it. Whereas older folks are still looking for the yellow pages, you know, myself included. You know, so oftentimes when I need to do something with technology, I ask a younger colleague or I ask my son, and then I get more comfortable with it. But I do think that it's pure comfort. It's not utility. They have no idea. And by the way, I would be remiss if I didn't stop here. Because they're digital natives, they're also digital victims. If we don't tell every young person that comes in our orbit how dangerous it is to have things on social media that could stop them from getting a job. You know, nobody wants to see you in your goth attire. Nobody wants to see you, you know, chugging a beer. That and every single, you know, Peter, you and I both work with SHRM, and every single HR person I know is trolling social media for their candidates, and they never get back to somebody and say, you didn't get an interview because I saw something that I didn't agree with on your social media. And so we should be telling them, yes, they're facile, yes, they're comfortable, but they should be careful how they use it, and they should learn how to use it for business purposes. They don't know how to construct a business email. They don't know how, you know, many times don't even know how to use a spreadsheet. So all those things that we consider digital skills, you know, they don't have, although they think they're the master of all things technological.
Oh, and you mentioned spreadsheets, and you know, if I want, similar to Joe, if I could wave a magic wand, I would want students leaving high school proficient with using Excel or a spreadsheet, and proficient in using, a customer relationship management software, whether it's Salesforce or anything, because those are two fundamental foundations. One, related to kind of data analytics, which we know is going to be a premium going forward. And then customer relationship management, because relationship management will not get automated. And so I think, this whole notion of what are the skills we need to be building much earlier is critically important. So
No,
why don't we kind of,
I would add Tableau. I think
Yes.
data visualization software is so important. It's data and analytics is going to be everywhere.
Yeah, the visualization and being able to tell the story is going to be critically important. Let's continue, because I know there are just some really interesting things in here.
Yeah, look, I mean, not a surprise, right? Being able to provide for my family came in above being able to provide for myself. This again shows, the nature of people, that we care about being part of a community, and some demographic groups more than others.
Well, and this is actually consistent. One of the reasons I got really interested in, workforce development is some of the work Gallup has done when it surveys across the world. The normative value that people have above anything else is, I want a good job for myself and a good job for my kids. Yeah. And it's this good is, relative to wherever you are in the world, but it, is this notion of being able to provide. And so I just find this to be kind of the critical thing. And how do we get education and others to realize they're the tool to help people achieve this normative desire that they have?
And use it more when they're talking to their students or talking to their clients. I mean, this is a way for you to be able to provide for your family. It shows that it will resonate.
Yeah.
Okay, this is one that I thought was really, really interesting, as well as being a little bit troubling. So we look right here at being certified in a technology skill such as computer science or data analytics. So look at the numbers for how this is going to be important. And then look at the numbers for a baccalaureate degree. And, I think this is an alarm bell for higher education to show that it doesn't have to be an either or. You can get, because I do not want, especially first gen people, I do not want them to think that a college degree is no longer the stepping stone to financial security and a secure life. It is. I mean, if we look backwards, it is. And there are still, you and I could sit here for the rest of the time and just name jobs that are always going to require a baccalaureate degree because they require state licensing or whatever. But look at this. So if I were running a higher ed institution today, I would immediately start embedding some kind of industry recognized credential into my associate's degree, my bachelor's degree. I would start doing it today so that when somebody left, they left with a degree plus an industry recognized credential. You combine those two numbers, being certified in a technical skill with getting a bachelor's degree, you really start to hit numbers. And clearly, when you see 50 to 69-year-olds saying certified in a technology skill is going to be your pathway to a well-paying job in the future, that should wake you up. I was disappointed that the numbers were so low in the skilled trade, because I'm a great believer in the skilled trades. I mean, I think no matter what happens, we're going to need carpenters and plumbers. We're going to need people with those kinds of skills moving forward. Now, when you go down to the demographic breakdown, that's where I say we have done a great job, and people in Houston are part of this, of convincing first the Latinx community that they need a bachelor's degree. I think that comes out loud and clear here, much more than we have with the traditional white population or black population. So I think that's really, that's hats off to Hispanic serving institutions in my mind. That's a real compliment there. But I do think that we've got to wake up, because I think we may send the wrong message to young people who stop going for that bachelor's degree. Even though this survey doesn't say that, they still think it's important. But I still worry about the 59% that didn't think getting a bachelor's degree was important. We need to bring them back by embedding those tech certifications.
And you and I could spend a lot of time on this slide, partly because, as you know, our focus is really on the jobs that require, or careers that require education and skills beyond high school, but less than 4 years of college. To your point, there are so many of those, and our economy relies on that space as well. And one of the things that when I think about kind of those, the trades and even positions like auto techs and others, is there's a pathway directly out of high school. But when you think about the education and learning that takes place for the next 4 or 5 years, it's the equivalent of getting a college degree. And we don't really talk about it that way. When you think about what it takes to become a master mechanic, which is, a really experienced mechanic, or a journeyman, craftsman, craft professional, it takes years to develop those skills, and they are highly valued, and we don't have a way of actually sharing what that is. And so I think that's another big piece we need to work on.
And this is another opportunity for higher ed. When I was in New Jersey, every registered apprenticeship program in the building trades was paired through the American Council on Education's crediting service. It's giving college credit for work that isn't done at a college. Every one of them got those college credits, and with some shorter term apprentice programs, they got maybe 15, maybe 25 credits. But with IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, that's a 6-year apprentice program. Literally, they had the equivalent of a bachelor's degree at the end of that. More colleges have to get into that mode about going to high quality apprentice programs and putting college credit with them, because that's how we give people the most flexibility and choice. They're choosing to go into a building trade. They're going into a great registered apprenticeship program. They're getting a great job. But if they can figure out how to link education, if the entities, the educational institutions around them can figure out how to link that, then when they're 50 years old and don't feel like doing a street job as a plumber anymore with a digger because their back is giving out, they can open their own business because they have a bachelor's degree and they've taken the business courses.
Yeah, and they have the skills to open a business.
Right. So I think all of this is a wake-up call to higher ed, that now is the time. Now is the time, both if you're a liberal arts college, we're not asking you to stop doing liberal arts. I love liberal arts. I'm a chronic reader. But the thing is, it's not one or the other. It's embedding these credentials, because it's going to be better for the individual, healthier for the institution. And quite frankly, if we have more poetry majors and dancers involved in AI development, we'll have better artificial intelligence.
Well, one, they're creative, which is another skill that doesn't get automated.
That's right.
So
That's exactly right.
I think we can go on to the next one. We've probably, beat that animal to death. So
yeah, I hear that horse whinnying in the background. I thought this was really important to see that so many people want to have a good work-life balance. And it's something that is going to be really important as people try to do job placement. For the first big hurdle we have is career guidance. We do such a mediocre job of that. We need to do more of that. But then we have to really look at placement. I mean, there will always be times, there were in our lives, that we took the first job available because we had to, the rent was due. I don't want to ever minimize that. But when you have a choice, when you have a look at, do I take this job or that job, which sounds so yesterday and not today, but that's going to come back. Really explaining to people how a job could give you a good work-life balance. Going for a 4-year nursing degree over a 2-year, a 4-year nurse has so much more flexibility in where he or she can work and how they can work. Whereas a 2-year RN, literally could outscore that BSN on the state licensing exam, but be limited in what they can do, particularly in a hospital setting.
Yeah.
And that, working 212s, or working 9 to 5, 5 days a week really are beneficial, when you're trying to raise a family.
Yeah.
So again, this is a real look of fear by educational attainment. We say words like globalization, and we don't realize that people with less than a high school diploma or less are seeing that in a negative way. Globalization is bad. It's stealing American jobs. I mean, you could get politicians to tell you this is how people win and lose elections, right? On people's fear. Those bad people from other countries are taking our jobs. Whereas people who are slightly more educated, see it as a way to open markets for American business and open opportunity. But it didn't get the reaction that I thought it would get. I thought it would get really high marks in the negative and really high marks in the positive, and it didn't. But I do think that looking at the idea of people becoming outdated or being automated out of a job, really interesting that you'll see younger people and less educated people are more afraid of that than educated people. And that's really interesting to me, because it means that with people with just a high school diploma, we have to really explain to them how they can work with machines, how the jobs that have you working next to a robot actually pay more than the jobs of old where you work next to a human being. You just have to learn different skills.
Right, and the different skills with working next to a robot is you're going to have to, probably input and extract and analyze the data that thing, and if it breaks down, you got to figure out how to, problem solve around it.
Well, you've seen that in your partnership programs. I mean, but that predisposition to think that machine is taking my job is there, especially with undereducated people. This is the one that made me sick to my stomach, right? I mean, all the work that we've done, I love the Workforce Investment Act and the Workforce Investment and Innovation Act, the Opportunity and Innovation Act, its successor, because that was my life for 2 years. The fact, and I know how hard people at American Job Centers, the workforce boards, I know how hard they work. I know they're out there marketing all the time personally, but the fact that so many people, if you look at these numbers, the fact that half of the people either don't know they exist, and even if they did know, they wouldn't go to them. That means they don't know the quality. That means they don't know the potential. Really heartbreaking to me. And then after I get out of my fetal position feeling sorry about this, we have work to do, right? We all have to talk with pride about the public workforce system. We all have to talk with all these new coalitions that are building, Skill Up and Skill This and Skill That, the quick rework, all the foundation philanthropy is doing and corporations are getting engaged in. We have to stand up. All of us have a responsibility to say, and don't forget to include the public workforce system.
Right. And then I think to your point, once again, this work that, Opportunity America did, which is the non-credit side of community colleges, are really focused on, career or job focused training that is very targeted to get someone with the skills into kind of a job, and how do we leverage that in the short term given the pandemic? And I just think that's going to be a critically important thing as we go forward.
Yeah, people should really tune in when you schedule tomorrow. That report is very interesting, and I hope a lot of community colleges tune in, because I think it should. We need to lobby for more funding for community colleges or better funding models.
Well, and begin to integrate the credit and non-credit side in a very different way. And I think, some of the suggestions they have in that, and I know I'm kind of hinting at it, but I do think we need to rethink kind of the importance of the community college. And I know we've got, we're probably getting close to being about 10 minutes out or 8 minutes out. So let's kind of get through this and then kind of finish up.
I mean, 66% of the people surveyed, 66% have never had the opportunity to participate in skills training on their job. That's amazing. Now, I don't know, being a policy person, not a polling person, I would have probably gone back and said, were you offered and and didn't take advantage of it, or were you not offered? And I think this is one that I shared actually with the SHRM people early on, because I know employers are offering incumbent workers training. I know but for some reason the word is not getting out. So this one scares me too.
Yeah, and just so you know, and it's really more for the audience, I'm doing a plug for a session we're going to do with Guild Education, which works with employers to actually help employees use their tuition reimbursement benefits in a more targeted, more strategic way. And I think that'll be an exciting, interesting conversation. that really helps maybe perhaps change this percentage?
Yeah, Guild is doing amazing work. And, you know, big employers doing amazing work, taking it back down to high school, letting people use that tuition benefit to finish their high school diploma. I think that's great. So look at this. This frightening, another one to take away, 72% of females did not take any, you know, did not either have the opportunity or take advantage of an opportunity with a former or current employer. When you see this recession is hitting females like crazy. I mean, it's the first time females have been so decimated in an economic downturn in my lifetime. And that's mainly because of hospitality and retail, but it's across the board. You know, I mean, there were management jobs at Lord & Taylor's, you know, that closed, or Pier 1, where these women are not going to get another opportunity like that if they don't go back and get reskilled. Again, look at the age breakdown. No, I don't know if there was an opportunity. 73% of people 50 to 69, frightening. So when you are talking to incumbent workers, and a lot of them right now are on reduced hours, so they're coming into one-stops, they're going to community-based organizations because they're afraid their hours get cut and then they lose their jobs. So they're coming in to kind of get ready in case they get laid off. You really need to make sure you talk about taking advantage of every opportunity your employer offers, because many of those opportunities are offered during the workday, which I think is the key. These people working can't do one more thing, right? And they certainly can't drive someplace for an hour and then take a 2-hour session. But when it's offered on the work site during the workday, they should take advantage of it.
And that was one of the interesting things I found about Walmart, you know, linking together that they do kind of help people complete, you know, their GED in high school on site, as well as kind of supporting kind of folks continuing their education in kind of a university setting.
No, absolutely. I think this is the era of employers doing things differently. And I think, you know, community-based organizations, public entities like the one-stops and colleges need to get in on this because they want to be a part of how employers are doing it differently. The only way we make sure that people get the most credit out of what they're doing is if it's stackable, could eventually lead to a degree, and if it's portable. If the work doesn't do those three things, it's just, you know, it's taking your time. But we need to help employers see the value of really making this meaningful for people, not only to do their current job better, but to move up in a career path.
I love this slide. I love
the
this
trust
slide.
question. I mean, it's interesting. I cannot believe, I want to know who these people are, these 800 people that trust the federal government more than nonprofits. I mean, that one I couldn't have predicted. I do think the business community coming in second is important and really makes me feel a little more positive. But this is something that people need to put in their language. People need to say to people that come to them for advice or assistance or guidance, you are in charge of your own destiny. You have to have skin in the game. You have to be committed to this. You can build the best program ever. And people who work in programs know this. And unless a person really commits to it, really puts their best effort out, they're not going to get the most out of it. So, I mean, this tells us we can use that. We can say, you know, you're in charge of this. You're the person who is going to be the most important in terms of what the outcomes are.
And I think our good friend Jason Tishko would say that in the future, it's going to be people are going to be their own career entrepreneurs. They're going to have to figure this out. And I think that's a really good piece of it. Let's quickly get through this because there's some questions out there that I want to ask.
No, I'd write. I mean, and Peter, you can offer these slides to anybody that was here today for what they're worth, you know, so they don't have to be like saying, oh, I wish I saw those numbers. Again, a snapshot of 800 people, one moment in time. But so we can just go through these pretty quickly. I couldn't believe young people trusted the federal government. God bless them.
Let's keep going.
It really interesting here that the majority here still wanted in-person classes. Now could that be because it goes back to that skills training issue, or could it instead be, as you and I have talked about, literally liking that network and that cohort model? Many of the nonprofits have found real benefit in cohort model. Look at that. Older people prefer in-person classes, but young people really like them, and those middle-agers like them as well. The interesting thing was social media. I'm not quite sure what the definition of social media was. I couldn't have been YouTube, because everybody 50 to 69 has used YouTube to figure out how to put something together they bought from a company. So I don't know what that is, but literally the older people are not interested in that online instruction. Again, looking at the demographic breakdown, look at obviously whites prefer in-person classes, but so Blacks and Hispanics love it too. They really went on that. I was shocked at the interest in the Latino population in online. But then I thought about it. We are a country that doesn't do very well in becoming bilingual. We native English speakers tend to speak native English and expect everybody else to. But if you think about it, you learn to speak a language first, you learn to write it a little bit, and then you learn to read it a little bit less. So not surprising that they would be more interested in learning new skills and a skills program that was auditory, so they could hear it and then not worry about not being able to read or write as well in that second language. Look at this. Online job searches really got smashed here. The majority of people were neutral about them. What that's saying is, obviously, I think it's saying, and this is me reading into it, not the poll, that they hate the fact that when they apply for an online job, they don't get an interview, and they oftentimes don't get a response. People like knowing how they did and getting feedback. So this is interesting. And it may be they're not using them correctly. So now I can't wait for the questions.
Well, I mean, there were some interesting ones. We've kind of hit somewhat on them. One obviously is clearly within the data, we're seeing, a lot of under-resourced, unemployed, underemployed, probably socioeconomic, challenged folks. So they're really a question related to how do we think about, what are the bridge programs that can help people, bridge from where they are to whether it's a career or, additional education, because they still, as you indicated, need to get, that GED and get proficient in, math and English.
Peter, this is like redundant, I know, but everything I believe is about partnerships. I think right now there is rarely one entity that can be all things to all people. And the more you can build partnerships where you build on individual partner strengths and send an individual job seeker to the best person to give them wraparound service, the best person to give them guidance, the best person to give them, retention ideas, or I think people have to understand that don't build your fiefdom to answer everybody's need. Instead, look around you and look for the quality partners in your region and partner.
No, I think that's, as you know, we've tried to build that collective table here to get people to find those partnerships. There were kind of three, broad questions. One, going back to kind of the disabled population. Some of the slides obviously had a number of different responses and they didn't add up to 100%. Is that, so there was a question on kind of, when you were given those options.
Chose not to answer.
They chose not to answer. So 37%, 23%, 40, those, when you listed the multiple responses, it was just.
And with the individual racial groups, it was that, the demographic groups, it was really that percent of that group. So you didn't see the whole, you may not have seen the whole thing.
Okay. And then there was a question about how far back do we need to do career awareness and career exploration? Obviously, we think about it in high school, but it probably needs to start earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I was a 9th grade teacher, so I used to complain what the people in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade didn't do. So I think the earlier you start, the better. I think kids love to dress up. when they're in preschool. You know, I'm not saying you should do career exploration in preschool, but you should say, you know, you like dressing up like a fireman. The firemen do great work. That's enough, you know, and then build on that as you go on. I don't think it should be one day in a school year. I think it should be throughout the school year. I think innovative, creative, talented teachers should look at ways to talk about careers embedded in what they're doing. So as you're teaching algebra, it doesn't take much effort to talk about who uses algebra day to day on their job or who uses geometry day to day on their job. And curriculum developers should include that, you know, as things that should be included. I mean, clearly literature teachers, reading teachers, language arts teachers have the ability to build work-related skills in from middle school on, and maybe even before, and they shouldn't be embarrassed to do that. I think the big problem with educators, being a recovering one myself, is they think that talking about work is dirty or limiting. It's expanding. You know, if you say to kids, if you give a kid a research assignment and say, pick a career and make sure you answer these 5 questions, you're teaching them how to write a research paper, but you're also teaching them how to learn about what they could do and what they're interested in, how they match their passion with how they make their money.
And Jane, it has been a pleasure. I have so many more questions I would love to ask you, but I probably, you know, tease the limits in going over with our audience. And I know we will have a little more time with some of our sponsors, but Jane, I cannot express my appreciation and thanks, because this has been insightful. And a lot of the comments that I saw in the Q&A were really positive about this data is really important. Folks are going to bring it back to their community colleges and to some other programs. And so we really appreciate you, one, sharing the data with us, because it is, you know, raises a lot of great questions, stimulates some, you know, activities. And I want to give you one final kind of, you know, swan song of any advice or, you know, coaching you would provide to Houston as we go forward, and then we'll bring this to an end, because I really have teased out going beyond this, because we should have made this like 2 hours.
Oh, nobody would have stayed. But I first of all, Peter, Houston is such a place of innovation. You know, I shared with you that I was there in the 90s as a researcher. And, you know, I was actually on an advisory board for a program that Genuine does in Talent Path, which is a post-baccalaureate kind of program that a lot of these well-thinking staffing agencies are doing. So I really look to Houston to bring your program, especially, but your college is there to bring forward ideas. And thank you to the people who sat through this, because they're much more an expert than I am. They're doing the hard work every day. They're working with people. So thank you to all of them for what they do. They're the ones rebuilding this economy. And if there's ever any way I can help, send me story ideas. You know, if there's any way I can promote what you're doing, what your employers are doing, you know, that you're the real heroes in my mind. So thank you.
So thanks, Jane. And I look forward to kind of our continuing collaboration. You've been great. And thanks for taking the time today.
Thanks, Peter.
So as we kind of bring this to a close, I want to thank our audience for participating in this. You know, we will make the deck available online, and it'll go out with the email. I just want to remind folks that coming up, we have 2 more scheduled UpSkill Works Forum series. One will be taking place on October 27th, really looking at how community-based organizations feed the talent pipeline and can serve as that bridge in one of the questions. We'll also have a guest with Guild Education on November 4th, really focused on how, you know, we can use lifelong learning and tuition benefits to our advantage. And as I indicated, I'm trying to get Opportunity America's Tamar Jacoby to join us probably in mid-November to talk about the role of community colleges. So once again, thank you so much. And I want to thank our sponsors once again for their support. And so you all have a great day and a great afternoon and a great week, and be safe. Thanks.